What a morning so far. It has been a really good one, and I'm so excited to get to turn things over now to Jennifer Breck, who is going to be sharing with us something that we talked about. I was sharing with Jennifer. Um, that we were talking about this very thing in the small group that I was in Tina and Emily and Manisha's session just a little while ago. So getting that clarity of career purpose. So we are so excited to have you, Jennifer, and I will just go ahead and just turn things right on over to you.
Awesome. Thank you for the welcome and for the introduction. So, welcome everyone. One thing, if you haven't met me before, which I'm just taking a look over at hands, I think I see a couple of familiar faces, but some unfamiliar faces. This is not a session where you're going to sit back, get bored, make yourself a coffee, catch up on Instagram. I'm really going to be challenging you to participate, first of all, in the chat, but also to do some work. So if you have a notepad beside you with a pen, that is going to be very helpful. If you're a digital person, open up your Evernote, your Notes app, whatever it is that you use, because we're going to actually be doing some clarity work here. And so I'm just taking a look in here. Yeah, clear AF. So I like to be a little bit salty with my language. I'm going to do my best to keep it moderately salty today. But I am really excited to be here talking to you about career clarity. And there is a reason why I am super passionate about this topic. And that is because I really think that you are the CEO of your career. And the more that you can step into owning your career and approaching your career kind of from an entrepreneurial mind frame, the more that you are going to get out of it and the more opportunities that you're going to be able to create for yourself and all that stuff. And it looks like my slide didn't even properly load on this one. So we're just going to roll with it because we're trainers. And that's exactly what we do. But if you do want to stalk me on socials, I'm supposed to have some fancy things swiping up. But if you like saltiness with a side of empathy, I'm on YouTube, I'm on LinkedIn and all of that stuff. But I'll put that up at the end because you probably don't care about that right now. You care much more about yourself. So what does it look like to become the CEO of your career? Well, today we are going to focus in this session on phase one, and that is to get super duper clear on your longer term vision for your career. So if you don't know what you're trying to build, how are you going to build it? Imagine you spill out a big container full of Lego all over the floor and you have no idea what you're going to build. You kind of just start building blocks together. You don't really know what's happening. And it's it's just a big stick. I don't know what the stick is. Is it a sword? Is it a skyscraper? I don't really know. But if you sit down with the intention to build something, you want to build a little house, you want to build a dinosaur. Can you tell I've been playing with my kids a lot lately and they're super into Lego? Anyways, if we know what we're trying to build, we're going to be able to find the right blocks and the right structure, put the right foundation down, and then build up from there. So that's where we're going to start with. Phase two is your UAQ, and I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about that at the very end of this little session that we have going on today. And then phase three is implementation. So that's really what you do going forward once you have phase one and phase two nailed down. So how many of you have been terrified to have that interview question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Or you have that in a discussion with your boss, or you're doing your annual review and it's where do you see yourself in 5 years? And most people I find are kind of full of panic. So let me know in the chat what your experience is. Now, me personally, I didn't always know the answer to this question. And it was something that I was really fortunate that early in my career, one of my mentors taught to me was this huge, gigantic difference of actually generally knowing what direction you want to go in can actually make in your career. Again, knowing what we're trying to build helps us actually build it. Now, that's really easy to say, but it's a lot harder to do, especially when I know that a lot of you are multi-talented, you're multi-passionate, you have a lot of interests. There's so many different areas that we can go to, especially within the L&D space, and so many different areas that we can serve as educators. So how do we actually start to figure that out? Well, we are literally going to do that today. So this really comes down to having a career vision. So again, I've already spoken. I won't whinge on about it. But if you don't know what success looks like to you, how are you going to get it? So we need to fundamentally answer this question so that we know whether or not we checked off the box when we actually get there. It's also, once you have the answer to this question, it's going to help you make sure, if you're considering a new job opportunity at a different company, if you're considering a different career path, your current company, anything like that, that you can make decisions that are in alignment with your actual vision. Also, this is a great way to avoid toxic jobs, which is something that I generally tend to talk a lot about. So if that's ever a thing, you know where to find me. This is also, I think, really important because when you know where you're trying to go and you know what your long-term career vision is that you're going to be able to communicate with people better. You'll be able to have better career conversations with your managers, with your mentors, with your peers, with your community, like we can have right here. And it's also going to help you build a professional brand that helps you stand out to actually get there. And then plus, when you have to answer one of these pesky questions in a job interview, you're going to have it nailed, right? So I know that when we think about creating this 5-year vision, it feels really big. It feels kind of scary. And it's like, oh, I don't have time for this. Like, who here has just time lying around? Like, I don't know about you guys, but when we went into the pandemic, I'm like, oh, like we're gonna have all this time. It's gonna be so great because we're not commuting, and and it's like, how am I so busy? I don't know. It's just we stay busy. So who has time amidst this chaos? None of us. So that's why I'm going to make it as easy as possible for you today. So now is a time for you to pick up your pen, get your paper, and we are going to take the first step, and that is going to be to create your mission. Now, maybe you're not going to have this totally nailed down final version that you're going to print off really fancy and laminate and put on your wall. Maybe it's a working draft that you're going to get to today, but you're going to have something down on paper if I have my way. So first of all, the mission, and let me know in the comments, how many of you have heard of mission, vision, values from a corporate perspective? Probably your company has mission, vision, values. Maybe you've done some goal setting surrounding mission, vision, values, but how many of you have defined mission, vision, values for yourself? This is where I find people tend to go a little bit quiet, and it's like, well, no, not really. I haven't really thought of it. I'll get around to it. Well, okay, we're going to get around to it right now. So the way that it doesn't port directly, but again, if you're CEO of your career, if you are a company, because you're a product that your company is employing and hiring, essentially, you want to have a vision. So the way that I encourage you to think about this is, what impact do you want to make? Now, I know that some of you might have really big, noble aspirations like saving orphan raccoons from the city dumpsters or something like that. Like there's all sorts of kind of like really big missions, and we feel like it has to be something so big and so meaningful. But really, when we think about it in our careers, it doesn't always have to be so big, so philanthropic. Like what we're really doing is figuring out what we want to be doing and what change we want to make. Now, this can be super corporate-y. No shame in being corporate-y. Most of us are working in corporations. That's totally cool. But think about the things that you actually want to be doing in your day-to-day work. What impact do you want to make on your company? So a couple of examples for you guys to work from, and then I'm just going to be quiet for a few minutes so that you can get something down. So one example, I want to help companies create great working cultures based on a growth mindset. My mission is to increase access to information through the diversification of learning materials and modalities. I want to improve leadership within an organization by enhancing enablement and ongoing collaboration. So there's so many different missions that you can have. So what I want to do, I'm going to be quiet. You're going to get to work for just a few minutes. I'm going to give you about 3 minutes here to just think about it and just jot down what comes to mind first for you. Don't overthink it. Just write it down. And as you guys are writing, if you have it jotted down, if you had an idea already or you have an initial thought, feel free to pop it in the chat and share it. Oh, so I see. So I'm just going to read off a few in the chat. Thank you so much for sharing. So I want to alleviate stressors related to learning about the company when starting a new job. That is awesome. I love that one. It's super clear and easy to communicate. That's great. And I see, Stu, you're not worried. This is very concise to bring connection to people, to work, to belonging, and help people be their best selves. I love that one. Scrolling, demystify the growth process for individuals who want access. I want to help people build confidence and skills they need to succeed in interviews. I love that one. I'm going to read off a couple more and then we'll go on to the next step. But I think that these are great for inspiration, to align people, passion, and purpose, to accelerate personal productivity and achieve organizational excellence. I want people to feel seen, heard, and valued. I want to help make wonderful content available to other parts of the world and languages. See, like this is, you guys, how many of you already knew the answer to this question before you came in here? Because you were coming up with fantastic stuff. So thank you everyone who has shared. And if you do want to drop it in, feel free to do so. And if it's not flowing so quickly for you, again, no sweat, write down what you have. You can come back to it and you can let it evolve, because sometimes these things need to exist and evolve with you as you establish yourself. All right. So next up, if I can get to my slide clicker now. Okay. So the next is the vision. And this is where you want your career to go. And this is where we get more into the career strategy, career goal conversation. So the reason why I like to start with the mission is that you want to know what overall impact that you want to make. Now for the vision, it's a matter of what does your career need to look like in order for that to happen. So you can answer questions like, does this mean that you want to step into leadership? Is that necessary for you to achieve those things? Do you want to do that to achieve those things? Or are you going to do this as an individual contributor? What level of collaboration and influence would you like to have on that? Again, there's varying levels. Not everyone wants to be like the chief learning officer at their organizations. Totally fine if that's not your ambition. But what scope of work do you really want to be doing? And another one, and I know that this is an interesting topic of a conversation, but where do you want your work to happen? So think of even the way that you want to work. What kind of work environment do you want? Do you want to be totally remote? Do you want it to be hybrid? Do you love going in an office and you want to be in an office every single day? Thinking through these things, again, is going to help you not only have clarity about where you want to go in your career, what levels of ambition in terms of like climbing the corporate ladder that you have, but also what more functionally do you want your career to look like? So that's what we're trying to answer here. So again, I'm just going to be quiet for a couple of minutes so that you can jot down your initial thoughts or things that you already had a little bit of clarity. And as you answer those questions, if you feel comfortable, feel free to pop them into the chat. All right, I'm going to give you guys about another minute. And again, if you're comfortable popping your answers into the chat, I'll share a few before we get into the next step too. I love all the different answers that are coming in. So just for those of you that are still writing or still typing, feel free to just kind of listen to me in the background. But one of the things that I love when we start talking about career vision is how different everyone's is. So just taking a scroll through, I see some of you want to like freelance or be consultants or start your own company, and that is so awesome. I see other people that it sounds like you want to stay at your level and that you love doing the work that you do and you want to continue doing it, which is phenomenal as well. And then I see at least one person who probably thinks that they want to lead a team in order to do that, or in order to continue growing in their career. And this is one of the things that I think is so worthy of talking about just real briefly as you're writing this down, is that so often we think about career growth in terms of growing up. And then you're just like scaling that career ladder, and that's how you are successful. But if we go back to that initial mission of yours, is that really this answer for you should be aligned with the actual mission. And again, not everyone wants to be in leadership. Some people, like I personally love training. I wanted to be a trainer forever. I knew as soon as I found this profession that this, exactly what I'm doing, would be a part of what I did forever. And if this was taken away from me, I would hate my work. Straight up, I would not like what I was doing at all. No matter where I was at in my career, whether it was working for someone else in leadership or now working for myself. But this can also be that you're learning different areas. This can be that you are focusing on different things or serving different audiences in different ways. So like maybe you start off with employee onboarding, but then you eventually, want to get into helping build like more inclusive and diverse workspaces. Maybe you want to get into leadership training because we really need to disrupt leadership and the stereotypical type of leadership training that exists today to break the mold of that singular leader vision that so many people still possess. So there's so many different ways that you can go. So the clearer that you get in your vision, and don't judge anything that comes up for you here. And don't be like, oh, well, I should be this, I should be that. No, you should be aligned with the work that you want to do. And that is the best thing for you to focus on, no matter what anyone else thinks. So that's my little rant about that. Okay. So what I'll do, again, just minding time. Again, if you want to share your thoughts with everyone, feel free to put it into the chat. I am taking a look through as you guys are writing things down. But let's get into the whoops, not, yeah, that one. Okay. I'm getting very confused with these slide changes for some reason today. Never mind me. So the third thing is understanding your values. And I could talk to you guys all day long about how important knowing your values at work are. So what are they? They're the things that matter most to you. They are how you show up. They dictate alignment with your job, with your work, with your company. One of the things, again, a lot of the people that I work with are in not so great workplaces, toxic work environments, things like that. And so often what we actually find it comes down to is a misalignment in the mission and a misalignment in the values, with the values being the things that you feel every single day. So what I suggest for you is to find 3 to 5 values that really matter most to you. And I have a list on the side of the screen so you can look to it for some inspiration. You probably have some gut things that are coming up that you can just write down right away. You might find that these evolve over time, but there's probably going to be core ones that are consistent no matter what. So in terms of how you answer this, think of things that are non-negotiables for you at work. If my company, if this client, if this partner didn't have this, we could not have a positive and productive working relationship. Think of words that you want people to use when they are describing you as well, because this is, again, how you're actually showing up. This is something that you can't compromise on. This is the foundation, really, of personal branding in your career. And again, for those of you that this is coming up right away, feel free to pop them in. I can tell you guys, for me, I first did this exercise about 10 years ago. And 3 that came up for me that have not changed, not even a little bit, still my top 3: transparency, kindness, empathy. Those are the 3 things for me. I'm curious to hear what yours are. How many of you are finding the value is a little bit easier than something like the vision or the mission? I find this is something that most people like. I think sometimes finding the right words, like we can feel pressure to pick the perfect ones. Again, they can evolve. It's totally cool if you're like, oh my gosh, there's so many that are important to me, but I see so many coming up, and I find there's a few that are coming up a lot, with like respect being a really big one, and this one is obviously one, hopefully, that is important to most of us. But understanding also, like, for things like this, like, think about, how does this look for you? And you don't have to answer that today. You don't have to answer that in the chat. But one of the things that I find helpful is also just understanding, what does this look for me in terms of how I carry myself, but also how does this show up for me in terms of how the people around me treat each other and how they treat me as well. So I see empathy coming up a few times as well. So we all have something in common. I also see transparency, fun, humor. There's so many. There's so many. But these are things like, now, if anyone is in a job search, thinking about a job search, because I know so many people are right now, your mission, vision, values, these are things that I would encourage you to bring into a job interview with you and to formulate questions around. So even if you go to a company's website, you can see their values that are on their page, which don't always necessarily translate into the real world, unfortunately. However, you can ask questions surrounding that and center interview questions on that. If you're in a role right now, you're feeling a little stagnant, maybe feeling a little stuck, you can check it against your career vision. Is this getting me where I want to go, or do I need to make some sort of change? And then you can ask yourself, what kind of change do I really want to be making? So you can see that this is those are just some of the ways that you can use these things in your career. And we'll have Q&A starting in just a couple of minutes so that we can really dive into this. But again, I thank everyone so much for sharing their thoughts and their values and their mission and their vision, because I personally think that having these open conversations within your community, within, the kind of the circles of success that we run in, and I know the L&D community is so tight-knit that the more that we know these for ourselves and the more that we communicate these with others, the more kind of synergy that we create within the community and the more support that we have in so many different ways in order to actually get these things. Now, we already answered, what did you come up with? So I'll skip to the next one. So after you've done this, when you feel like you're in a good place with these, what I would encourage you to do is move into phase 2. And again, my little picture is broken. I'll point it out, but I'm not going to dwell on it. Now, if you want to hang out with me on the socials, you will find that I talk about unique awesomeness quotient an awful lot. So that's UAQ. And this is really the thing that sets you apart, makes you stand out, and aligns with your potential. So your UAQ is fundamentally rooted in these things. But then it takes into consideration the things that you're really great at and the things that you are very interested in order to help you achieve that mission that you have for yourself. Now, this is something that I think a lot of people think of, again, more in a job interview situation, like how can I stand out on my resume? How can I stand out in my interview answers? But this is something that really should be following us throughout our careers in terms of the projects that we were working on, how we choose to overinvest time and where to invest a little less time in our career, because we don't have to achieve on all of the things in order to be successful at work, right? So if you want to dig into that, I didn't have time to build it into today because, again, these things take time, especially your first time doing it. But if you are interested in figuring out and uncovering your UAQ, you can go to capdeca-solutions.com/UAQ-starter kit. It's on, I just realized I read that incorrectly. That's okay though. The URL is on the screen, or shoot me a note and I'm happy to send it over to you. It's just a nice little workbook to get you started on the way. Now, what I really want to do is use the rest of our time today for any Q&A that you guys have surrounding career clarity, career strategy, workplace alignment, any of those things. And just as you do that, I will put up where you can stalk me. A little light cyber stalking, never hurt anyone, as long as, we're not being weird about it. But I am on Instagram, I am on YouTube, I am on LinkedIn, and I am on TikTok, and I live in pretty much all of those places daily because I live on the internet nowadays. So I would love to see you guys over there if anyone is interested in hanging out with me in any of those places, all of those places, some of those places. I'm not going to make you, but it would be really cool if we could be friends there. So those are there. And I am going to just take a look over to the chat and over to the Q&A. I think it's easiest if you guys pop any questions that you want me to answer during our time today into the Q&A, just because there's a lot of different stuff in the chat, but I'll take a look in both places. All right. So Anna asked, what do you think is the best way to ask questions around these values? As you said, values are on my company website, but how do you really uncover ones that are really operationalized? So I think that there's a couple of different ways. So especially where you see something like empathy on a website. So then based on you can literally ask the question like, I know that empathy is really important to you at Acme Incorporated. What are some ways that you see empathy integrated into the day-to-day actions of the team? That's one great way. So because you're not just like, are you really empathetic? Really? Tell me about it. You want to know how that actually shows up. And you can actually gauge, first of all, the actual answer that they give, but also how quickly they can answer these questions as well is really going to speak volumes. The other thing that you can do with these values is that I strongly advocate for pre-employment checking your employer, which I think most people don't do, but really should do. So this is your due diligence to make sure that you're making the right step with an aligned company. Because again, I can put anything onto a website doesn't mean that it's true. So looking at sites like Glassdoor for any reviews that you can see, and then you can see what people are saying in terms of, if the company said that empathy was their top value, but then everyone's writing about how callous leadership is, that would raise a red flag for you. The other thing that I encourage people to do that, again, very few people do, is that you can use tools like LinkedIn or just leverage your network, find someone who has worked for that company in the past. I tend not to go with current employees. I try to find people that have left recently and reach out to them and ask if they're open to having a brief conversation, so that you are reference checking, ideally the team, not always possible, but if you can get some insight into what the company is really like to work for, that can be very helpful. Curious if anyone has actually done that before. Let me know in the chat if you have. I'm scrolling through here, and never mind me looking away. I'm like on multiple screens right now. Yeah, and I see. I thought about it. I mostly do it for other people, recommending or not recommending companies. Yep. It's interesting. I've only had a handful of people ever reach out to me, like a very small handful of people reach out to me surrounding former employers. And it was actually all about a big company that I worked for that they wanted to know. They were really, I think, more asking for a referral. So it's something that like I think we need to normalize doing because especially if you are someone that's in an active job search, remember it's not just the company that is choosing to hire you. You are choosing the company that you are going to work for. And they are going to be extraordinarily lucky to have you, your talents, your skills, and for you to make the impact that you are going to make. Now, obviously, they pay you money to do that, but they benefit so much more than what they actually pay you. We know that. We know that employees have an ROI. So you want to make sure that you are valuing that fact and knowing I think it really makes a difference, especially when you are in an interview, to know that even if you're not in multiple conversations, this is still an active decision that you're making. I was able to check a potential new employer with a former employee and was not excited. Yeah, so there's like, I mean, we can fall down that rabbit hole. You want to take into consideration, like ideally when you're doing this, if you have a friend who was there or a friend of a friend, that's generally who I would target. You do need to take into context, like maybe they didn't leave on the like best of terms. So like understanding the perspective is really what you're trying to get at. I know some people have asked their potential boss to give references of team members. Um, but just like how you're never going to give a bad reference to a potential employer, they're not going to give a bad reference either. So the low key ones that we can do are very, very helpful. Yeah, and Jennifer has a great story about a colleague had a candidate reach out to her regarding a company she used to work for, and share where she left and how to avoid her mistakes. That is great insight into a culture. And I think that for a lot of us, that corporate culture is something that is becoming more and more and more important. And there's so many reasons for that. And I personally think that everything that has happened in the past 18 months has just brought our BS tolerance level down to like 0 or -12, somewhere in that range. Let me know if you relate to that at all. And I think that especially when we are working remotely, that a lot of the BS that we are used to dealing with in the office has gone away. And for those of us that are going into the office at least part of the time, we really want to avoid a lot of that. But I also think that, our purpose is something that we are prioritizing more and more. If we are going to spend more than 40 hours a week at work, we want it to be something that we are excited to do, that it's impact that we are excited to make, that it's impact that, we're well equipped to make, and really values our skills, abilities, talents, and the things that we know and allows us to grow in the ways that we really want to grow. I also think that there's a lot more awareness surrounding corporate culture and how it can be negative to toxic. Not all companies have great corporate culture. And even especially if you're within a big company, this can actually be more micro macro, where you have some teams that are maybe a little bit dysfunctional that we just don't want to deal with anymore. And I think that's one of the reasons why you're seeing so many changes in terms of the workforce right now. Obviously, we have this massive trend towards people who want remote work or at least hybrid work, but also, the discussion surrounding the great resignation. And a lot of people are making moves right now. And I think it's just because they know that there might be greener pastures that are out there. I like Quentin's comment. Yes, I'm being more salty in my interviews now and really ask inquiring questions. You are interviewing that company just as much as they are interviewing you. Come in with a list of questions for them. And to me, it's actually a red flag if you're interviewing with a company that doesn't give you time to ask questions. I've had those interviews myself before where, they're drilling me with questions for 30 minutes and then we have 30 seconds left before the call is over. And they're like, oh, do you have any questions for me? And it's like, yeah, I had 10, but you didn't really take that into consideration. There's both parties are included in that. So ask as many questions as possible. You want to make informed choices. I think that as your interviews progress, you can ask more and more questions, and there's different levels of interviews that are good for asking different levels of questions. Like asking about time off in your very first interview, probably not going to give the best impression. Impression management is still important, even though time off is also important. But definitely as you get more towards like the final rounds, and definitely when you get into the offer, like when you get into an offer stage is where I really think it is full blown interrogation mode for you and that company to make sure that the opportunity is the opportunity that you want to say yes to, and that the terms that you are saying yes to are the terms that you want to say yes to as well. But then we're just going to get into a whole negotiation conversation if I fall down that rabbit hole. Any other cues or thoughts that you guys have for me? Was this helpful? Is anyone feeling like any more clear after the session today? Let me know.
Oh my goodness. This was just phenomenal. I love it.
Awesome.
Yeah. And it's good to take the time. It's not easy and it's not quick, but it is so important to really think about that mission and the vision and values, because that's where it all starts from.
100%. Build from the right foundation.
Mm-hmm. And I'm so glad I'm not the only one stepping on Legos at my house.
There is few things worse in the world than stepping on a Lego if you have bare feet.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, it looks like some of you guys had good pointers from this. I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah. Great.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your messages. And again, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, and I went and found you on the Insta and on LinkedIn.
Awesome.
Yeah. Great. We have a few more minutes. So if anybody has any other questions, or if anybody wants to come up on stage, you can raise your hand and we'll bring you up on stage. And
I didn't even know that was an option.
Yes, it is.
That's actually really cool. Who wants to get up here? Come up, hang out with us.
Yeah, just raise your hand and I will make sure to bring you up. Oh, time to expand on UAQ.
Yeah. How much time do we have left here?
Got about 6 minutes.
6 minutes. Okay, yeah. I don't have like any fancy slide material ready, so I'll just like turn that off. And we can chat about it because I think that makes the most sense. So Unique Awesomeness Quotient is really about getting to know yourself and the things that you're really good at work. So I think, and again, let me know in the chat if anyone has been through especially performance discussion or goal setting discussion around this. So in my experience, the traditional approach to professional development has been, call out the things that you're good at. Okay, you're good there. Continue on. And the emphasis has been on the things that you're not as good at. So your weaknesses, another question we hate answering and conversation we don't like having. So, weaknesses that I've been told over and over and again in my career, Jennifer, you talk too fast. Well, this is me talking as slow as I can possibly talk. There's no going slower than this. Like that's not going to change. I've been told that I'm abrasive because I am a direct communicator, but one of my greatest strengths is my direct communication. So I can't not be called abrasive ever by anyone without losing my direct communication, which is one of my greatest strengths. So I think that we want to make sure that the things that aren't our strengths are things that like we just aren't getting in our way. So yes, I learned how to talk slower. Yes, I learned how to, communicate more effectively in ways that people can receive more effectively. And I know I've learned to identify when people, can't, there's different levels of directness that are okay for different people. However, though I was never going to be like the least abrasive person ever, I'm never going to be the slowest talker ever and things like that. I think that our greatest potentials are in the things that we are naturally good at. So when you are a naturally fantastic communicator, when you're naturally great at taking complex things like complex technologies and making them understandable for an end user, I think these are things that when we double down on our strengths, that is our greatest potential to grow in our career. So this is what UAQ is based on. It is your natural talents and amplifying them in order to elevate and accelerate your career. So how do you find them? I really think that there is a few different places that everyone can look. And if you go and download that workbook, it's just going to be a repetition of exactly what I'm about to tell you now. So first of all, what comes naturally to you? And I hate to compare, and this is not to say that anyone is any better than anyone else in any sort of way, because we all have unique talents. We all have unique awesomeness. But what things just come naturally to you that maybe you've noticed colleagues don't pick up so quickly or aren't as good at? What things do you just seem to learn really, really quickly or have gotten good at really, really quickly? Over the course of your career, or especially in your current role. So that's the first place that I look. Now, this can actually be the hardest question for a lot of people, because I feel like a lot of us, especially people that are really committed to their own growth, we're always like, okay, like, where can I be better? Where can I be better? Like, I'm not good at this. I need to be better at this. And we've been conditioned to look at those things that we're not great at and to just kind of be like, yeah. Like, this is just normal. I also do think that when we are exceptional, that we don't always have the context that we need in order to realize that these are things that we're really great at, because it's just normal for you to be really fantastic, talented, and exceptional at that thing. So you assume everyone else is as well, even when that's not necessarily the case. So the second place that I encourage you to look in order to discover your UAQ is to look to what are people asking you for help with. So if you have a colleague who has a question, what questions are you getting? Like, is there a particular software like that people are always coming to you for? Or is there a particular challenge, more soft skills oriented that people are always coming to you for? When someone needs an idea for how to structure a program, are they coming to you with that because you're a great high level thinker? So looking to where people are already acknowledging you through asking for help and asking for input is another great way to start uncovering your UAQ. The third place is to consider your interests. And this is where I think a lot of people miss, because I think that we're great at a lot of things. They're not always things that we're really excited to do. Just because you're good at it doesn't mean you love it. I mean, we tend to be interested in the things that we're great at, but that's not always the case. Or maybe the strength is not one that you really want to grow on. So for example, one of my clients recently, he had been in a very toxic workplace, and he, as a result of that, was very good at de-escalating emotionally charged situations. Wow. Exceptional at it. He did not want to go anywhere near that professionally because it was very triggering for him because of the way in which that skill was developed. So even though he was exceptional, he didn't include that in his UAQ with intention. Doesn't mean he never will, but at this time, that was not something that he wanted to focus on in terms of career growth because it wasn't bringing him joy. So it has to be something that you like doing. It has to be something that you're interested in as well. Write down those three things. I encourage doing it on paper, because what you can do is you can go and mark it up and say, where is the overlap? Because it is the intersect of those three things that you'll really find your UAQ. Now, sometimes your UAQ is in the middle of two of the circles. Sometimes it is smack dab in the middle of the three. But where you find that overlap is really where you're going to find your UAQ. Now, what you'll actually find is you have a lot of different things within there. So then what you do with it is you take a look and say, what are the things that I want to capitalize on today? What are the needs of the company that I'm working at right now that this aligns with? Because then you can focus on those things. Or if you're in a job search, what does this company need? Where is my UAQ and what can I focus on in the conversations and as you're onboarding in order to accelerate from there? So it is something that evolves over time. You actually have a lot. When you first do this exercise, I find a lot of people really struggle to write anything down. But once you get a few things down, it actually, like, it will start to become easier. And it is something that I encourage you to go and revisit on a regular basis. Because again, the more that we're aligned with this, the more we are staging ourselves for success.
Yeah. Wow. I can't wait. So it's up on my other screen. I keep looking over here because I'm like, I got to put my stuff in so I can get that. That is phenomenal. Awesome. So I put the link to the UAQ kit in the chat a couple of times.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
But thank you. We are so glad that you came and shared your awesomeness with us today. And it was so great to meet you, and just can't wait to spend a little more time in all of this. So I know you gave people some great food for thought.
Awesome.
So thanks a bunch.
Thank you, everyone. And thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right, everyone. We will see you soon. Take care.